Hey everyone, my name is James and welcome back to Chippy Gaming. So today we're back once again to carry on with our Hardcore Master Mode adventure. So for those who didn't get to check out the first part of this adventure, I'm trying to beat for the very first time Hardcore Master Mode Terraria. This is something I've had on my bucket list for a really long time, and hopefully by sharing my adventure, I can help some of you tick it off your bucket list as well. Now, before we get into it, remember, if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to go down there and give the video a big fat thumbs up, and while you're at it, why not subscribe to Chippy Gaming? This year, we're trying to become the first Terraria channel to hit 1 million subscribers, and with your help, it's totally possible. I will say, even if you've been a subscriber for a while, it's always worth going down there to just double check that you are still subscribed. YouTube's really weird. It can unsubscribe you, but then still recommend a video once in a while. But with that out of the way, let's jump into part 2 of our hardcore adventure. So, welcome back to the run. When we left off in episode 1, we just managed to take on and destroy Skeletron. Now, this gave us access to the dungeon, and I was actually here for a couple of reasons. The main reason being I really wanted to get a water bolt. It's the weapon I feel most comfortable with, and I feel like probably the most overpowered, cheesy weapon we could get at this point in the game. I feel like if you're going to do a hardcore run, it's probably best to rely on those really overpowered weapons anyway, and we're actually going to be doing this in hard mode as well. Now, I did also want to grab a cobalt shield. This negates knockback, so that's going to be good for certain boss fights. But one of the most important reasons I arrived in the dungeon was to try and get the engineer. Now, I realized in my original run on Chippy's couch that traps are probably the most likely cause of death outside of just like, you know, a bit of fall damage or being stupid around enemies. And I learned that getting a grand design at the soonest possible moment is probably one of the most beneficial things you can do. So I may have lost an engineer or two to try and get her, but hey, I got one. So before heading home, I started to get a little bit overconfident in the dungeon. I feel like the water bolt played a big role in that. Essentially, with me just firing away, I thought I was kind of invincible. Turns out, not so much, because I got smacked around a couple of times, and I was pretty much one hit away from ending the run. But once I was back home, it was time once again to get organized. Now, I was really lucky that my engineer actually teleported up to the surface. I didn't need to wait for a new day. So I bought some wire cutters, and I went ahead and made the multicolored wrench. I went back because I forgot to buy the mechanical lens, and it's weird, even though the player already has a ruler from the start in 1.4, you still need to go and buy a ruler from the goblin to make the grand design. I feel like this is a bit of an oversight, but hey, the grand design is awesome, and I swear it's going to save us a whole bunch throughout the rest of the run. So now that we have the water bolt, I thought it was a good time to do the Eater of Worlds. This is a required boss. Even though we've kind of skipped it by doing Skeletron first, we do need the shadow scales from the Eater of Worlds to go ahead and make the Nightmare Pickaxe. You need that if you want Hellstone, and you need a Molten Pickaxe if you want access to any of the ores in hard mode. It used to be you would be able to get a Reaver Shark and actually skip this fight, and maybe that's what I would have done if that was available. But I just thought with a water bolt, we may as well just dive head on into the Eater of Worlds. It's not the most hardest fight in the world. I guess you kind of have to be careful, but with a water bolt, it's pretty easy. So one of the things I did after this is I actually stuck around and destroyed all of the different shadow orbs in the world. Because the Eater of Worlds isn't really a problem for us, he makes a really good boss to farm. We're going to need a lot of money in hard mode to get some of the better reforges to keep us safe. So every time I had the opportunity to do a little bit of farming, I just went ahead and did it. So, with the Shadow Pick acquired, I decided it would be a good time to work on some more NPC homes. What I'm trying to do here is actually set up a pylon network just to make teleporting around the map a little bit quicker. I also feel like it's also a little bit safer. And I just want to show you real quick how good the grand design is. It doesn't matter what trap you're coming up against or how far away it is. If you can see that bright red wire, it's time to pull out the grand design. I absolutely love this, and if there's any tip I want you to take away from this series, it's the grand design. It's really overpowered in a way, and I can't recommend it enough. So since we'll soon be facing off against the Wall of Flesh, it was actually time to head into Hell. We managed to get a shadow key in the dungeon, so any shadow chests that we find are going to be good for just free loot that we can sell. Now, what I'm mainly here for is the forge, which we'll need for hellstone bars, and also fire blossom. I really like to be equipped with obsidian skin potions. The thing is, if you break a lot of pots in Hell, you're actually pretty likely just to get a couple for free, but if you get some fire blossoms, you're good to go. Now, I was really gutted about this. We had a voodoo demon trapped in this house, but I got super paranoid that I was going to die, and I teleported back home. And once again, I just want to show you how good the grand design is. Once you have access to this and you have it out all the time, you start to realize just how dangerous the world is and how much the developers really want to end your hardcore run. Get a grand design, you will not regret it. So what's funny at this point is I spent about half an hour just trying to get all my NPCs in the right spot and get them to a certain level of happiness to buy a pylon. But none of that was working for some reason. This world was just a little bit off. So I had to rely on the old reliable of pairing up the arms dealer and the nurse. And this is actually how I bought all of my pylons. So at this point, I put one in the forest, I put one down in the caverns, and I also got one for the jungle just so I could teleport around. So after all that was set up, it was back to Hell. Now, we're in Hell to do a few main things. Number one, we need to get a guide voodoo doll. Now, I actually managed to trap a voodoo demon inside of a little box. I really will take no chances with these things. They deal so much damage. So with that, I managed to get my guide voodoo doll. Now what we're trying to do is just set up a nice open network for me to fly and kind of walk through. If you've never seen me fight the Wall of Flesh before, I actually use a method that was popularized by the YouTuber Uremir. So essentially what you do is you open up all of the houses so that you can easily navigate through them, and you make it so when you use a water walking potion, you can just nicely glide along on the lava. So I usually don't spend too long doing this. I open up every doorway, so it's about 5 blocks high, and this just makes me feel a little bit more secure that I'm not going to get stuck on some kind of doorway. So the best part about this is because we have access to the water bolt, and I've used this method so many times at this point, I knew exactly how long the fight would last, and I knew that I only really needed to do a couple of houses in Hell. For those who don't know, houses only actually spawn in the middle of Hell, so the end parts are nice and smooth, easy terrain usually, so that's probably the best place to actually get the bulk of the fight done. So with my new obsidian skin potions, I have to get to work on actually getting some hellstone. So first off, I grabbed some obsidian, and then I headed down to Hell once again to grab hellstone. I would keep a good close eye on your obsidian skin potion, by the way. I got really lucky because I actually wasn't paying attention at all. And when I noticed, I had like 2 seconds left to teleport back home. Yeah, try and be as observant as possible. Don't be like me. So with our newly acquired hellstone, the only thing I actually really wanted to make was a molten pickaxe. Now, if I had an abundance of hellstone, I probably would have made an imp staff as well, just to get a little bit more damage. And it's also a nice little companion to have in hard mode when you're obviously a lot weaker. But I made the pickaxe and I felt pretty good to go. So just to explain this method real quick for anybody that's never seen me do it, essentially what I'm doing here is I'm using a water walking potion to walk safely along the lava. I'm also using an obsidian skin so that if I enter the lava, I'm not exactly going to get burnt. And I'm using the water bolt in combination with a mana regen potion and aiming the bolts towards the ceiling so that when they bounce down onto the boss, they get multiple hits, you know, potentially hitting multiple eyeballs. You can fire directly at the fight like a gun. It doesn't actually really matter all that much, but if you can make it work, firing upwards does usually deal a little bit more damage. Now, it was actually during this fight that I realized that I haven't actually been upgrading my mana throughout the adventure. Essentially, I've been putting my fallen stars inside of my chest to use on potions, and that was probably a pretty bad mistake. It meant that I had to spend a lot more time pausing and letting the mana regen potion do its thing, rather than just working on the boss fight. So even with me forgetting to upgrade my mana, once we got to the houses of Hell, the Wall of Flesh was defeated. Meaning, at this point, we're now doing Master Mode, Hardcore, Hard Mode. Bit of a mouthful, but a pretty great achievement. I even managed to get the goat skull, which is a really cool little mount that you can have. It's kind of like the unicorn. It just looks a little bit more demonic. So having learned what I learned doing the hard mode series for Chippy's couch, once I was in hard mode, I decided to change my strategy just a little bit. In the Chippy's couch run, what I decided to do is initially start going for spider armor so that I had a little bit of protection while I was going about mining all the different hard mode ores. I decided this time we're not doing it. But what I did decide to do though is immediately and finally upgrade my mana because it was looking a little bit embarrassing. So my plan for this run is to dive straight into getting as much hard mode ore as possible. Whereas I made spider armor on Chippy's couch, I decided that what I would do is go from pickaxe to pickaxe until I could get the final set of armor, rather than wasting my time in the middle making something like orichalcum or palladium armor. So I headed to the corruption and I started smashing some demon altars. Now a good tip is, do not linger around in here. So I actually had one of my practice runs end at this point because I got slapped around by one of the enemies in here. Don't let that happen. Just grab as many demon altars as possible and just teleport out of there, especially before all the raids start coming in. But with that out the way, I wanted to get into mining as soon as possible. Now, what I'm doing is I'm actually using as many buffs as I have available. Whether there's an enemy nearby, I'm always using regen, iron skin, mining, a food source, maybe a shine potion, maybe a night owl, and of course, a spelunker potion. And this is just to speed things up as quickly as possible. I'm always really thankful that I took the time to make a elevator, because I often find that if you have a elevator, getting the first couple of ores is actually kind of easy. You know, they're pretty easy to spot when you're flying down a massive cavern, rather than needing to mine a whole bunch of different tunnels to find any ore that you need. So straight off the bat, I got enough cobalt by just mining 2 large veins, and what I decided to do is make the cobalt pickaxe. Like I said, we're not going for different weapons, we're not going for different armors. I want to go through the pickaxes, make the required upgrades such as the anvil or the forge, and really focus on getting that adamantite. So for those wondering how I actually make these videos, what I do is I sit down, I record many hours of gameplay, and then I chop it up, including all the relevant clips that I think are going to be good in the video, and then I do the voiceover, which is what you're listening to right now. Now, while I was editing this up, I decided I wanted to include lots and lots of clips of me mining away. So I wanted to do this for a couple of reasons. Number one, I wanted to show you that while I was mining about, I was trying to be as safe as possible. Number two, I wanted to show you kind of how much of a grind this part of the game is. It really does drag. This is also the point where I died in my Chippy's couch let's play. But I also wanted to use this time to personally say thank you. Today's Chippy Gaming's 10-year anniversary, and although I didn't know it at the time when I was 14 creating this YouTube channel, YouTube completely changed my life. It's the thing I care about most in this world. I love Terraria, I love making these videos, and I love that I have you lot to join me on my adventure. So lots and lots and lots and lots of adamantite later, we finally have enough for a full set. Now, for a full set, what I wanted is a full set of ranger armor, and we're also going to be using the adamantite repeater, and this is going to be the weapon we're going to be using to farm a lot of the ingredients we need to get our next weapon, which is hopefully going to be the Daedalus Stormbow. So now that I had a pretty good set of armor with a decent amount of defense and a good weapon to keep me safe, it was time for the next part of my plan, and that is to create an AFK farm so that we have a really good amount of holy arrows. For those who don't know, holy arrows paired with the Daedalus Stormbow is the absolute dream combination. So what I like to do is create a nice little AFK pyramid in the hallowed biome with a little block creating a lip, and then I put down a little bit of lava and I chill out. One thing I will say is if you decide to build one of these AFK farms, just remember to only use it during the daytime. At nighttime, wraiths spawn in, and if you have an enemy that travels through blocks and you're in a confined space, it's usually a recipe for disaster. Now, not long after this, we had our very first drama of the run, which was an unexpected pirate invasion. The thing with the pirate invasion is you can't cancel it out much like you can a natural mechanical boss. So what you've got to do is make sure you are ready to go. So for me, I was lucky because I already had a couple of buckets of lava. So I immediately got to work on creating a little pit so that we can hide underneath it and allow the lava to take care of the pirates for us. One thing you do need to be aware of is that they made a small change in 1.4 so that once a pirate captain dies, he spawns a spirit enemy that can also travel through blocks. I believe they did this so that people wouldn't AFK farm the event so much. So you do need to be ready because these things travel fast and they also deal a lot of damage. Now, thankfully, I only had one pirate captain, but it is worth keeping a close eye on. What I do like about this lava method, though, is that it's entirely safe if you can kill the spirit. You don't have to worry about the pirate ship in the sky. You've just got to wait until the event is officially over. And then if you want, you can log out of the world and then the pirate event is over and you don't have to worry about, you know, some of the enemies that may be left over. So now that that's out the way, we need to get started on farming Souls of Light. Now, the first thing I like to do is give my weapon a little bit of a reforge if it's needed, because we're going to need to kill lots and lots of hallowed enemies. Now, usually, I tend to find a natural area in the world where I can kind of hang back, and then the lava around me will actually take care of a lot of the enemies for me. Now, unfortunately, I spent a really long time trying to create as many scenarios as possible where enemies would fall into lava, but I couldn't get it to work. I couldn't find one nice area where I could do a little bit of AFK farming. So it just turned into this series of me making weird tunnels around lava, them not really working, but I'm just killing enemies as I go. And that is essentially how I managed to get all of the Souls of Light that I actually needed for some of the hallowed chests that we're going to do in the future. So while doing all this, I saw something happen that I've never seen in Terraria before. I actually watched as a hallowed mimic spawned into the game, but it spawned itself in a pool of lava. So it essentially meant I had one natural free fight against the hallowed mimic, and I didn't even need to engage with it. Now, as you can imagine, as somebody who wants a daedalus stormbow, the suspense was absolutely killing me. The idea that I may get a free daedalus stormbow without needing to farm or fight a mini-boss sounded like the best thing that would ever happen to me in Terraria. But unfortunately, after all that waiting, it ended up being a flying knife, which is probably one of the worst items you can get. It was like Terraria was mocking me. So in a fit of rage, I did decide to get a bucket of lava and just kill a whole bunch of enemies. Look, I'm sorry, but that was probably the biggest tease I've ever had in Terraria. These enemies, they needed to die. So when it comes to hallowed mimics, what I like to do is I like to gather 30 Souls of Light. I do this because I feel like having 2 fights against a hallowed mimic feels a little bit more satisfying than having one fight, going back to farm, and then coming back for another key. Now, when it comes to the fight, I'm still using my pre-hard mode wings, and what I like to do is move away from it in a straight line. When it jumps upwards, I like to dash underneath it, and I just keep that rhythm going. Once you know how a hallowed mimic works, I don't feel like they're too threatening. You do have to be very careful though, because if it goes into that phase where it knockbacks your projectiles, that's a really easy way to die. So the second you hear that like bumper cart sound, just stop firing, all right? You've got to mentally train yourself for it because it's so dangerous. So from the first hallowed mimic, I actually got myself a crystal vial shard. Even though we're not going to be using it for any of the boss fights, I feel like they're really good, especially if you want to speed up some of your AFK farming. So from the second hallowed mimic, we ended up getting an illuminant hook. Now, this is never an item that annoys me, but it still isn't quite the daedalus stormbow that we need. The third hallowed mimic gave us another hook. All right, maybe I'm a little bit annoyed, but I guess it's something good that we can sell. But then on the 4th attempt, when all hope seemed to be lost, we got it. We got the daedalus stormbow, one of the best weapons in Terraria, and the weapon we're going to be using for the next 4 boss fights. I absolutely love using the daedalus stormbow. I feel like when you pair it with holy arrows, it just lights up the sky. So with that in mind, I actually gave it a really nice reforge, and it's now an unreal daedalus stormbow. After that, I went back to a little bit of world maintenance. I ended up making a couple of houses in the hallowed so that I could hopefully get the pylon in the future. I like just being able to teleport around. It really does make me feel safe. And then in the hallowed, I got a gelatin crystal, which we're going to be using eventually for the queen slime fight. So with boss fights in mind, I did decide it was probably a good time to actually get ourselves a set of hard mode wings. So I did what I usually do, and I built a nice long rope into the sky. For me, this is probably the quickest way to attract wyverns. And then what I usually like to do is I like to bring the wyvern to a nice flat arena that I already have, so that I know that when I'm going to be jumping over the wyvern, I'm not risking any chances of actually being hit. And with the Daedalus Stormbow and Holy Arrows, yeah, a wyvern doesn't really stand a chance. Now, it's usually at this point that I wait around for a little bit of rain. Typically, once I enter hard mode, even if it's the first couple of days, I'll always do the same thing. If it starts to rain, I bury myself in the snow biome and try and get an icy feather from an ice golem. Weirdly though, I didn't have any rain. I haven't seen rain at all, at least in a really long time. So I actually got bored of waiting around. I spent a couple of days in my AFK farm in the hallowed biome, just trying to gather as many holy arrows as possible. And then I even got so bored, I went and cleared out a bunch of the traps in the dungeon so that we'd have a better time in there post Plantera. And still no rain. So some of you may have noticed that in pre-hard mode, I actually skipped over the Queen Bee. The Queen Bee is actually my Achilles heel in Terraria. It doesn't really matter at what point in the game I fight the Queen Bee and what weapon I use. I usually cut it kind of close. Since we've not had any rain in the world though, and I don't want to wait around for it, I decided to do the Queen Bee so that I would have access to the Witch Doctor. The Witch Doctor, of course, sells you the leaf wings, and even though they were nerfed in Terraria 1.4, they're still better than what we've got now. So not long after the Queen Bee was defeated, the Witch Doctor moved into the jungle. So that night, I actually prepared to do our very first mechanical boss fight. So for this fight, I'm going to be using as many buffs available as possible. I have a really good amount of holy arrows. I've got that Unreal Daedalus Stormbow. So the last thing we need to buy are those leafy wings. And then with that, it was time for the Destroyer. Now, this is where I'm going to be ending up part 2. So if you want to find out what happens with the Destroyer fight, look out for part 3 on your homepage in a couple of days. Guys, thank you so much for supporting the first 2 episodes of this series, and thank you so much for being patient as well. These take a really long time to make, longer than I actually anticipated. So I'll see you when that comes out. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, if you enjoyed the video, give it a big fat thumbs up, and if you're new around here, make sure to click that subscribe button. Alright, see you in the next one, guys. Peace.